Hey there. So glad you found your way to my channel. Can't sleep tonight? Don't worry, I'm here with you. Let's spend this time together with some quiet stories, real ones from real people all around the world. If you enjoy what you hear, feel free to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to join our little midnight community. Now, let's begin our journey together.
In the quiet community of Northampton County, Pennsylvania, 33-year-old Jessica Paget had built a life centered around her family and her natural affinity for nurturing children. She shared her home with her husband Micah and their 3 young children, a family unit that had been officially formalized just 2 months earlier when Jessica and Micah married after nearly a decade together. Those who knew the couple, particularly Jessica's mother, Danelle, often remarked on their strength as partners, noting how they consistently supported each other through life's inevitable challenges, presenting a united front even during difficult times. Jessica's days were filled with the constant motion that comes with raising 3 energetic children, a responsibility that kept her perpetually engaged but brought her genuine fulfillment. Beyond her role as a mother, Jessica had found professional purpose in early childhood development, a field that perfectly aligned with her natural temperament and abilities. Friends frequently observed that Jessica seemed born to care for children, possessing an intuitive understanding of their needs and a seemingly endless reserve of patience. This innate talent had led her to pursue professional training in childhood development, eventually securing a position as a daycare assistant at Duck Duck Goose Child Care Center in Northampton. The rhythm of Jessica's daily life reflected her commitment to balancing her various responsibilities. Each morning typically began with the familiar routines of family life, preparing breakfast, helping with school preparations, and ensuring everyone started their day properly. After dropping her older children at school, Jessica would arrive at Duck Duck Goose with her 2-year-old son, beginning her workday at approximately 8:30 a.m. Her colleagues valued her reliability and the gentle care she provided to the children entrusted to the center. Beyond her immediate family, Jessica maintained close connections with her extended family, particularly with her mother, Danelle, and her stepfather, Gregory Graff. These relationships had developed over many years, with Gregory having been part of Jessica's life for approximately 2 decades. The connection was such that Jessica occasionally supplemented her income by working at Gregory's business, Distinctive Fencing, which operated next door to the home he shared with Danelle. This arrangement allowed Jessica to maintain regular contact with her family while earning additional income. The depth of Jessica's bond with her stepfather was apparent in her social media activity, where she had once posted a Father's Day message expressing gratitude for having 2 dads in her life, noting that she loved them both very much. She had referred to Gregory as the second best dad she could have asked for, suggesting a relationship built on trust and familial affection that had developed over the many years of their connection. Those who knew Jessica in various capacities as a mother, wife, daughter, friend, or colleague consistently described her warmth and genuine care for others. She approached her relationships with sincerity and dedication, qualities that endeared her to many in her community. Her marriage to Micah was characterized by mutual support and partnership, with both working to create stability for their children and build toward their shared future together. November 21st, 2014, began as an ordinary Friday for the Paget household. Micah left early for his construction job, as was customary. Before departing, he prepared coffee, kissed Jessica and their children goodbye, and headed out while the rest of the family was still asleep. following the familiar pattern of their weekday mornings. Jessica woke shortly afterward to ready herself and the children for the day ahead. After successfully navigating the morning routine and dropping her two older children at school, she arrived at Duck Duck Goose Child Care Center at approximately 8:30 a.m., accompanied by her 2-year-old son. The morning passed uneventfully at the daycare, with Jessica attending to her regular duties, caring for the children. As lunchtime approached, she mentioned to her colleagues that she needed to send a fax but couldn't use the office machine as it was malfunctioning. She explained that she would use her lunch break to visit her mother and stepfather's house just a few minutes' drive away, where she could access Gregory's fax machine at his distinctive fencing business. This seemed a perfectly reasonable plan, as the location was close by, only about 4 miles from the daycare, and Jessica was thoroughly familiar with the property and equipment. Though her mother, Danelle, was away in Florida at the time, Jessica knew she could easily access the house and use the fax machine in Gregory's adjacent business. She anticipated a brief visit with no reason to linger, as her stepfather would likely be occupied with work, and she needed to return promptly to her duties at the daycare center. Before leaving for this errand, Jessica briefly called Micah. Later, he would recall that while she seemed slightly rushed during their conversation, there was nothing unusual about her manner. She remained characteristically talkative, giving no indication of concern or apprehension about her lunchtime plans. As the afternoon progressed, and Jessica failed to return from what should have been a quick errand, her colleagues at Duck Duck Goose began to grow increasingly concerned. The consistently punctual Jessica had now been absent well beyond her allotted lunch break, a behavior entirely out of character for her. After waiting for a period, they contacted Micah to inquire if he knew anything about her whereabouts. He was surprised by the call, having no information beyond their brief conversation earlier. He explained that his morning interaction with Jessica had been limited to making coffee, kissing her and the children goodbye, and leaving for work while everyone was still asleep. Nothing that would explain her current absence. Attempts to reach Jessica by phone proved unsuccessful. Calls went directly to voicemail, suggesting her phone was either turned off out of battery or in an area without reception. More worryingly, her 2-year-old son remained at the daycare center. Without her, a situation entirely inconsistent with her dedicated approach to motherhood. The growing anxiety among her colleagues and husband indicated that something unusual and potentially concerning had interrupted Jessica's normal routine. When informed of her daughter's unexplained absence, Danelle later shared that she had called Jessica's phone over 100 times in succession. With each call that went to voicemail, she would immediately hang up and dial again, hoping for a different result. Increasingly worried, Danelle booked the earliest available flight home from Florida, anxious to be present as the situation unfolded. Despite Jessica having told her colleagues she was heading to use the fax machine at her stepfather's property, Gregory claimed he had neither seen nor heard from her that day. According to his initial statement, he had been occupied with repairing his truck and had no contact with Jessica. This apparent disconnect between Jessica's stated intentions and Gregory's account added another layer of confusion to her unexplained absence, raising questions about what might have occurred during the time she had been away from the daycare. As evening approached, with still no sign of Jessica, authorities were notified of her disappearance. Police officers arrived at the Duck Duck Goose Daycare Center and immediately began the process of distributing her information to various media outlets. They carefully noted her distinctive physical features, including a footprint tattoo on her shoulder, and described her last known appearance, wearing a black sweatshirt and gray trousers with her hair styled in a ponytail. These details were crucial for the public to be able to identify Jessica if she were seen. The search for Jessica Paget quickly expanded throughout the Lehigh Valley area of Pennsylvania. Missing person flyers bearing her image began appearing on street signs and storefronts across the region, creating a visible reminder of her absence in the community. Local news stations broadcast details of her disappearance, emphasizing her status as a newly married mother of 3 who had vanished under mysterious circumstances while on her lunch break from work. One reporter noted, "Across the Lehigh Valley, these missing persons flyers were popping up on street signs and storefronts. A newlywed young mother of 3 vanished suddenly. Now her family is searching for answers." The media coverage helped spread awareness of Jessica's case, increasing the number of people actively looking for her or any information about her whereabouts. Those who knew Jessica well found her disappearance especially troubling because it contradicted everything they understood about her character and typical behavior. Her best friend Sean remarked that Jessica had been particularly content and genuinely happy in recent months, making her sudden absence all the more concerning. "She was so content and genuinely happy lately," Sean said, noting that the fact she had disappeared immediately seemed ominous, as it simply did not match the Jessica they knew. The inconsistency between the reliable, responsible Jessica they recognized and this unexplained disappearance suggested something significant had interrupted her normal routine. Community support for the search effort grew rapidly. Within a short time, over 8,000 people were following the missing persons Facebook page created for Jessica. Search parties formed with volunteers combing through areas she might have visited, demonstrating how Jessica's disappearance had touched many beyond her immediate circle. The collective concern reflected both the community's compassion and the disturbing nature of having a young mother vanish without explanation in the middle of an ordinary workday. While the community mobilized, detectives visited Danelle, who had returned from Florida, and Gregory to gather more information. Following standard investigative procedure, they inquired about Jessica's relationship with Micah. As domestic partners are often relevant to missing persons cases, Danelle firmly rejected any implication that Micah might be involved, stating that such a possibility had never entered her mind. She described how she had been in constant communication with him since Jessica's disappearance, and that his distress appeared entirely genuine, reinforcing her confidence in his innocence. Gregory, however, presented a markedly different perspective during these conversations. Unlike Danelle, he expressed skepticism about Micah, offering few positive comments about Jessica's husband. Given Gregory's long-standing relationship with Jessica, nearly 20 years as her stepfather, investigators felt obligated to consider his opinion seriously, even as they noted the contrast between his assessment and Danelle's unwavering support of Micah. During his interview, Gregory characterized Jessica as someone who had consistently made poor choices in romantic partners, referring to her as a loser magnet. He claimed to have always harbored reservations about Micah, suggesting that Jessica had a pattern of being drawn to unsuitable men. He loved his stepdaughter, but felt sorry for her. Investigators noted recording Gregory's claim that she had always attracted the wrong guys. When asked about the facts Jessica had intended to send, Gregory stated he had no knowledge of its contents and mentioned that their machine had been malfunctioning for several days, which he claimed would have prevented any record of her visit. This explanation seemed plausible initially, though it would later be contradicted by evidence. While investigators pursued these initial interviews, another team focused on locating Jessica's phone using tracking technology. They determined that the device had remained in one location for several hours, just a few miles from her workplace. Officers followed this digital signal to a shopping center where they found Jessica's white car parked outside a Dollar General store. The parking lot was dark and empty when they arrived, with most businesses already closed for the evening. But Jessica's vehicle stood out noticeably. The scene presented several concerning elements. The vehicle was unlocked, with Jessica's phone, purse, keys, and various cards all inside. Items a person would not typically leave behind voluntarily. Her phone continued to ring as officers opened the car door, indicating it had remained functional, despite going unanswered throughout the day. The investigators noted that the driver's seat position appeared consistent with someone of Jessica's 5'4" height, suggesting she had been the last person to drive the vehicle, though this detail would later prove misleading. One investigating officer noted, not that police are elaborating on. At this point, they won't tell us how they think that Jessica's car ended up in a parking lot halfway between that daycare and the place she was going. Her stepfather's place of business. The district attorney says that right now, investigators are on high alert that this is not a standard missing person case. This assessment reflected the growing concern that Jessica's disappearance involved foul play rather than a voluntary absence. Further investigation revealed that security cameras had captured Jessica's car at an Exxon gas station at 12:56 p.m. on the day she disappeared. Approximately 15 minutes later, at 1:10 p.m., the same vehicle reappeared on camera, traveling in the opposite direction. The recording showed the car making an unusually rapid entry into the gas station before executing a quick left turn to exit. By 1:15 p.m., the vehicle had arrived at the Dollar General parking lot, where it was later discovered. Though the footage was not entirely clear, it appeared that the person who exited the driver's side was not Jessica. The individual was notably taller than Jessica's 5'4" frame and dressed in light-colored clothing. This person's actions were peculiar. They remained beside the car momentarily and appeared to adjust the driver's seat, possibly to create the impression that Jessica had been driving. After this brief activity, the individual walked away down an alley adjacent to the parking area. Shortly thereafter, a small white truck was seen traveling at high speed along the road next to the alley, moving away from the area. Initial suspicion fell on Micah due to his height matching that of the person seen leaving Jessica's car. However, this theory was quickly dismissed when investigators confirmed his alibi. He had been at his construction job throughout the day, with multiple colleagues able to verify his presence. With Micah eliminated as a suspect, investigators sought to enhance the surveillance footage, hoping to identify the vehicle's license plate and gather more details about the white truck seen leaving the vicinity. They sent the footage for technical analysis, anticipating that enhanced images might provide crucial information about who had been driving Jessica's car and what vehicle they had used to leave the area. As days passed, Jessica's missing person posters became ubiquitous throughout the community. Her image appeared on street signs and shop windows and across social media platforms, a constant reminder of the young mother's unexplained absence. Danelle, having returned from Florida, struggled deeply with the emotional strain of not knowing her daughter's whereabouts. Gregory presented himself as a supportive presence during this difficult time, reassuring Danelle that Jessica would be found soon and offering comfort as the search continued. Meanwhile, enhanced surveillance footage returned from analysis with a significant detail. The white truck captured leaving the parking area bore distinctive markings that matched Gregory Graff's vehicle used in his fencing business. This discovery shifted the focus of the investigation more directly toward Jessica's stepfather, raising questions about his potential involvement in her disappearance. When confronted with this information during a follow-up interview, Gregory offered an explanation that initially seemed plausible. He stated that the presence of his truck in the area was merely coincidental. He had parked there earlier in the day while having repairs completed and had later stopped for food at the Exxon gas station. However, careful review of the footage clearly showed his truck driving past the gas station rather than stopping there, contradicting this part of his account and creating the first significant inconsistency in his story. Gregory elaborated that upon returning home, several of his employees had been present to collect their pay slips, but there had been no sign of Jessica. When investigators spoke with these employees, they confirmed having been at the property and noted that Gregory had engaged them in casual conversation about their weekend plans, displaying no unusual behavior. He had been chatty and asking them about their weekend plans. Investigators noted finding this aspect of his story corroborated by witnesses, though Gregory's explanation contained elements that aligned with verified events. Investigators remained troubled by inconsistencies in his statements and demeanor. This prompted them to conduct a more thorough examination of the Graff residence, with particular attention to Gregory's business premises adjacent to the house. During this search, they discovered that the fax machine Gregory had claimed was not operational, was in fact working perfectly. Moreover, they recovered a fax of a health insurance policy time-stamped at 1:04 p.m., confirming that Jessica had indeed been at the location at the time indicated by the document. The investigation took a darker turn when officers found a bloody tissue in a waste bin in the basement of the home. Additional blood traces were identified on a mattress and carpet in the same area. When questioned about these findings, Gregory attributed them to his hunting activities, a plausible explanation given his known interest in hunting. However, his behavior during this line of questioning became increasingly concerning. He went upstairs mentioning a need for a cigarette and made a cryptic comment about being sad that he would not be able to see his dogs anymore. This statement struck investigators as unusual and potentially significant, suggesting Gregory anticipated some major change in his circumstances. Recognizing the signs of an impending confession, officers accompanied Gregory outside the residence in a heartbreaking moment that would mark the last interaction between the couple. Danelle confronted her husband, demanding to know where her daughter was. The intensity of this confrontation underscored the growing suspicion that Gregory possessed knowledge about Jessica's disappearance that he had not yet shared with authorities or his wife. The district attorney later commented on the investigation's focus, stating, "The investigation in this case by the state police, I will say early on, focused on Mr. Graff because of inconsistent statements that he was giving with respect to his activities that day did not correspond with the investigation information that was being developed by state police. These inconsistencies, combined with the physical evidence discovered at the Graff residence and the surveillance footage of his vehicle, created a compelling case for further scrutiny of Gregory's activities on the day Jessica disappeared. 5 days after Jessica's disappearance, Gregory Graff provided investigators with a full confession, revealing details that were as shocking as they were disturbing. He admitted to having deliberately lured Jessica to his house under the pretense of needing assistance with his computer, knowing she would be coming to use the fax machine anyway. When she arrived at approximately 1:04 p.m., Gregory watched as she sat with her back toward him, focused on sending her fax. In that moment, he retrieved a firearm and shot her in the back of the head, an act of violence that ended her life instantly and without warning. After the shooting, Gregory explained that he had moved quickly to conceal his actions. He dragged Jessica's body into a bedroom and then took her car to the Dollar General store parking lot, deliberately creating the impression that she had driven there herself. Security footage had captured him, adjusting the driver's seat forward before returning home in his truck, a detail that corroborated his confession. Upon his return, his employees arrived to collect their paychecks, engaging in ordinary conversation about weekend plans, while Jessica's body remained hidden in the house, a chilling juxtaposition of normalcy and horror. Once his employees had departed, Gregory's actions became even more disturbing. He set up recording equipment in the bedroom and filmed himself committing acts of sexual violation against Jessica's deceased body. Investigators later discovered 8 such recordings on his computer, along with evidence that Jessica's head had been covered with a plastic bag during these acts. The depravity of these actions shocked even experienced law enforcement personnel, adding another layer of tragedy to an already devastating case. The search for Jessica concluded when authorities located her body buried behind Gregory's shed, partially covered with leaves. This grim discovery confirmed the family's worst fears and transformed a missing person case into a homicide investigation of the most disturbing kind. When questioned about his motive, Gregory stated that his intention had been to sexually abuse Jessica's body after death. He mentioned having watched explicit material and purchased items from an adult store in town before the incident, suggesting a degree of premeditation. His statements revealed a disturbing lack of remorse, going so far as to comment that he wished he had chosen a neighbor as his victim instead of his stepdaughter, a remark that further emphasized the callousness with which he viewed his actions. The district attorney noted the sexual nature of the crime, stating, "There's definitely a sex angle to this crime that is still being developed in terms of the particular nature of it. But based on what the investigators have learned, there's clearly some motive that involves a sexual assault, I would call it." This assessment aligned with Gregory's own statements about his intentions, though. The legal implications would prove complex given the timing of these acts. For Danelle, learning the details of her husband's actions was beyond comprehension. She later described sitting in the corner of the room, crying, as she attempted to process information that defied understanding. A betrayal so profound it seemed impossible to reconcile with the man she had known for years and had shared her life with. The realization that the person she had trusted had taken her daughter's life represented an almost unfathomable convergence of losses. Her daughter and her marriage simultaneously destroyed by Gregory's actions. Local news outlets reported the devastating development. Breaking news right now. And it is tragic news from Northampton County. A woman who has been missing since last week has now been found dead. The confirmation of Jessica's death sent ripples of grief throughout the community that had been hoping for her safe return, transforming collective concern into mourning for a young woman whose life had been cut short in such a tragic manner. Following his confession, Gregory Graff was taken into custody and charged with criminal homicide. The district attorney explained, during an interview with the investigators, he did admit that he intentionally and knowingly caused the death of the victim at his home. He related that he utilized a firearm to cause the victim's death, and that he then took the victim's body and disposed of it on his property. This formal acknowledgement of Gregory's admission emphasized the clear evidence of his guilt in Jessica's death. The case presented certain complexities regarding potential charges. Under Pennsylvania law, prosecutors can pursue capital punishment in cases where murder occurs in preparation for another felony, such as rape. The district attorney explained this legal nuance. Under Pennsylvania law, a murder in preparation of a felony is an aggravating factor that allows prosecutors to pursue capital charges. Rape rises to that level, but the sexual desecration of a corpse does not. Yum. Since the sexual violations in this case occurred after Jessica's death, rather than before, this particular aggravating factor could not be applied. Consequently, despite the heinous nature of the crime, prosecutors were unable to seek the death penalty, a limitation that would later frustrate some members of Jessica's family. Despite his earlier confession, Gregory entered a plea of not guilty to first-degree murder. When formally charged, his defense team pursued a strategy aimed at securing a third-degree murder conviction, even suggesting the possibility of an insanity defense to mitigate his culpability. The prosecution, meanwhile, maintained their position that the crime constituted first-degree murder, emphasizing the premeditated nature of Gregory's actions. He had lured Jessica to the house, prepared a weapon, and deliberately acted while her back was turned, all elements suggesting planning rather than impulse. During the trial, jury members were visibly affected by the evidence presented, particularly the video recordings recovered from Gregory's computer. The material was so disturbing that several jurors were seen crying during its presentation. Finding it difficult to maintain their composure in the face of such graphic evidence, the jury foreman, identified only as David, later commented on the profound impact of this material, stating, "It's something I'll never forget. Anyone who says it didn't bother them is a liar or evil." The jury's deliberation process was remarkably brief, given the severity of the charges. When David asked for a show of hands on the verdict, the response was unanimous and immediate. It took longer to sign the papers than it did to hold the vote. He recalled noting that the jury had reached its decision in approximately 6 minutes. This unusually swift deliberation reflected the overwhelming nature of the evidence presented and the jury's clear consensus on Gregory's guilt. The jury found Gregory Graff guilty of first-degree murder and abuse of a corpse. He received a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment. Without the possibility of parole, the maximum penalty available, given the legal constraints that had removed the death penalty as an option. During the sentencing phase, Jessica's sister Christy addressed Gregory, directly delivering an emotional impact statement that captured the family's profound grief and anger. "I hope you fear for your life every day and feel some sort of remorse one day," she said. "And that day, when you meet your Maker and you are banished to hell for eternity, I hope maybe then you'll know what you took from us and how we felt that day." When Gregory appeared to become emotional during this statement, dabbing his eyes with a tissue, Christy challenged the authenticity of his display, adding, "You're pretty good at faking it." What I've learned from this trial is that even now, you don't regret it. You don't even care. You could have just taken your punishment but you decided to take us through this excruciating trial, making us relive the nightmare. Before leaving the courtroom, Gregory offered a brief apology for his actions, saying in part, "I sincerely apologize for the pain and suffering I've caused. I hope you can one day find it in your heart to forgive me." This statement, coming after his earlier lack of remorse and the decision to put the family through a trial, despite his confession, struck many as hollow and insufficient, given the magnitude of his crimes. Gregory's behavior following the trial raised further questions about his sincerity. Danelle had filed for divorce, a natural response to the devastating betrayal. But Gregory complicated the process by refusing to agree to the financial terms and declining to sign documents that would allow their estate to be divided. He cited dissatisfaction with the proposed financial arrangements, creating additional stress for Danelle as she attempted to separate herself legally from the man who had murdered her daughter. Further extending the legal process, Gregory filed an appeal for a second trial, claiming ineffective representation by his original attorney. In this appeal, he presented a new narrative about the events leading to Jessica's death, asserting that he had been under the influence of drugs when he argued with Jessica, subsequently experiencing a blackout that prevented him from remembering his actions. This claim contradicted his earlier detailed confession and struck many as a transparent attempt to avoid the consequences of his actions rather than a genuine issue with his legal representation. In the wake of Jessica's death, her family and the broader community sought ways to honor her memory and support those she left behind. An online fundraising campaign for Jessica's children received nearly 300 donations within its first week, totaling over $11,000. This amount soon grew to $20,000, reflecting the community's desire to provide for the children who had lost their mother so tragically and ensure they would have financial support despite their loss. Christy, Jessica's sister, felt strongly that her sister's murder warranted the death penalty, given its particularly heinous nature. Recognizing the legal limitations that had prevented such a sentence, she began advocating for new legislation that would make desecration or mutilation of a corpse during a homicide an aggravating factor, eligible for capital punishment. Consideration. In her view, for Jessica to be murdered at the hands of someone she adored and trusted so much was devastating in and of itself. But the way he degraded and violated her body after death simply made it inhumane. This advocacy represented an attempt to find meaning in tragedy by working to prevent similar limitations in future cases. For Jessica's mother, the emotional aftermath was overwhelming. Danelle described her emotional state following the ordeal as feeling constantly surrounded by broken glass, a powerful metaphor for the sharp, persistent pain of her loss and betrayal. The dual nature of her tragedy, losing her daughter to violence committed by her husband, created a uniquely devastating form of grief that defied easy understanding or resolution. Jessica's husband, Micah, faced the challenge of supporting their children through their grief while managing his own. He found a measure of solace in the community's response during the search and aftermath, noting, "Seeing how many came out to search for her. Through the darkest times, you're able to see there are good people out there." That's pretty much the only thing that kept us from completely falling apart.
Big kid to charge side.
8. This recognition of collective compassion provided a counterbalance to the horror of what had occurred, offering a reminder of humanity's capacity for kindness even in the darkest circumstances. Reflecting on his loss, Micah shared, She was the most wonderful person I have ever met in my life. It's so heartbreaking to know that this is now our forever. These words captured the permanence of grief, the understanding that while life continues, it does so with an irrevocable absence at its center. For Micah and Jessica's children, moving forward meant learning to carry this absence while preserving the love and memories that remained. The impact of Jessica's death extended well beyond her immediate family, affecting friends, colleagues, and even those who had known her only briefly. One community member observed, trying to get through it together. You know, there's no one person that took a hit on this. We all did, entire community did. So the only thing we can do is help each other, pick each other up, and just try to keep on moving forward. This sentiment reflected the ripple effect of tragedy through a community and the natural human response of coming together in times of shared grief. Another community member noted the far-reaching impact of Jessica's death. I mean, you just have to read about it a little bit, and you see it impacted not just a family, but an entire community. You know, not even Northampton, not even Whitehall, but just out of state, just everything, everywhere, and everybody. You know, it's just everyone that she'd ever talked to, or ever touched, or ever had contact with. You know that she was a beautiful person. For those closest to Jessica, finding ways to keep her memory present in daily life became an important aspect of their grieving process. Micah found small but meaningful connections to Jessica in unexpected places, particularly through their daughter. Every now and then, you just sit back and talk, and you remember, and you tell stories, he shared. My daughter is about her size. You know, she's wearing her clothing. So every day, I get to watch her jump down the steps, wearing a t-shirt or a sweatshirt that I used to see her wear every single day, or a pair of pants. And it is nice. It really is. It's nice seeing that. Every now and then, it's like, hey, I remember her wearing that. Those are some of the good positive things that I get to experience every day, at least. These quiet recognitions offered a gentle way to maintain Jessica's presence in the family's daily life. Moments where memory briefly transforms absence into presence, allowing grief to momentarily coexist with joy. Through such simple acts, Jessica's family found ways to ensure that she remained part of their ongoing story, that her influence continued to shape their lives despite her physical absence. Balancing remembrance with forward movement created particular challenges when parenting children through grief. It's hard sometimes, Micah explained, because you know as a parent, you don't want your children to be sad and upset and put in the other chance you want them to remember. This tension between acknowledging loss and preventing it from overwhelming young lives required careful navigation. By sharing stories, preserving photographs and keepsakes, and speaking of Jessica, often the family worked to keep her memory alive in ways that honored her significance without allowing grief to define their children's experiences. The educational community also responded thoughtfully to the tragedy. Jessica's children's schools provided counseling resources and created supportive environments where they could process their grief with professional guidance. Teachers worked with the family to be aware of significant dates or potential triggers, ensuring that the children received additional support during particularly difficult periods. In the quiet neighborhoods of Northampton County, the community gradually returned to its rhythms, forever changed by the loss of Jessica Paget, but determined to honor her memory through acts of kindness and mutual support. Annual remembrance events were established, allowing friends and family to come together on the anniversary of her death to celebrate her life rather than focus exclusively on the circumstances of her passing. The case would be remembered as a tragic reminder of how quickly life can change and of the importance of cherishing connections with loved ones each day. It also highlighted the resilience of a community in responding to tragedy, the capacity to provide support for those most directly affected, and to find constructive ways to move forward while acknowledging a profound loss. For Jessica's children, growing up without their mother would present ongoing challenges, but the foundation of love she had established during her time with them, combined with the support of family and community, provided a basis for healing and growth. Though her life had been cut short, Jessica's influence continued through the lives she had touched, particularly those of her children, who carried forward aspects of her character, her values, and her capacity for love. In this way, remembrance became not just about looking backward, but about carrying forward, allowing Jessica's spirit to continue influencing those she had loved, ensuring that her life's meaning extended beyond the tragic circumstances of its end. Through this conscious preservation of memory, Jessica remained present in the lives of those who had loved her, her story becoming part of the ongoing narrative of her family and community. On the evening of October 4th, 2005, in Lincoln, California, a young woman named Christy Wilson visited the Thunder Valley Casino. The autumn air was crisp that night. As she entered the building and made her way to the blackjack tables, Christy was quite skilled at card games, particularly blackjack. She had a natural talent with numbers, able to calculate odds and percentages with remarkable ease in her mind. The casino staff knew her well as she frequented the establishment and had even met her boyfriend there the previous year. Christy was 27 years old and maintained close relationships with her family. The daughter of Debbie and Dennis Christie had grown up in a loving environment. After her parents' relationship ended, Debbie married a man named Pat, who worked as a police detective in San Jose. Christie's best friend Tiffany once described their friendship as that of soul sisters, doing everything together. Tiffany would later recall, "I picture her in our front room, just dancing and laughing and having so much fun. I could be having the worst day, and she would always be there for me. We always knew that no matter what we said, we were there for each other." That evening at the casino had started like many others. Christy played at the blackjack tables for some time before receiving a call from her boyfriend, Danny Burlando. The pair had met the previous year while playing blackjack at the same casino, and they had moved in together not long after their relationship was described as tumultuous. About a month before Christie's disappearance, they had an argument that became so loud and aggressive that neighbors called the police. Both Christy and Danny were arrested for domestic violence after that incident. The call Christy received at the casino on October 4th was brief, lasting only 55 seconds. Danny later explained, "I told her to come home, and she was like, 'Okay, I'm finishing up. I'll be home soon.'" This exchange was captured on the casino's surveillance cameras at 10:28 p.m. Sadly, Christy never made it home that night. The following day, when Christy failed to return, Danny filed a missing persons report. He had attempted to reach her multiple times, leaving messages asking her to call him back. One of these messages said, "It's been 24 hours since I talked to you last. Call me, okay? Call me if you're not. Call me. What's going on? The authorities began their investigation, immediately starting with a thorough examination of Christie's apartment and her car, which was still in the casino parking lot. Nothing in her apartment indicated a struggle or that she had planned to leave. All of her important belongings remained untouched, including her beloved cat. Christie also had a job interview scheduled in the coming days, something she was unlikely to miss. As a police officer himself, Christie's stepfather, Pat, had a gut feeling that something was seriously wrong. Nothing about the situation made sense to him, or to anyone who knew Christie well. Danny told investigators that he had last spoken with Christie at 10:28 p.m. on October 4th. He explained to the police that he had been having dinner with his parents that evening, though there were several hours that no one could account for, from 11:30 p.m., when he was dropped off at home, until he used his phone the following day. Phone records showed that Danny had called Christie's phone 78 times after she went missing, which raised some questions among investigators. Investigator Murchison interviewed Danny and described him as cooperative with the investigation. With no immediate leads from Christie's apartment or vehicle, the investigators returned to the Thunder Valley Casino to review the surveillance footage from the night Christie disappeared. The casino's extensive camera network provided valuable insights into Christie's final known hours. As investigators reviewed the footage, they observed Christie arriving at the casino and making her way to the blackjack tables. They then noticed her sitting at one of the tables alongside an older man. The video showed him attempting to place his arm around her, but she firmly brushed him away. Casino staff, who knew Christie, mentioned that her behavior that evening seemed uncharacteristic. Although she was drinking, it didn't appear to be heavily. Yet her demeanor was noticeably different from her usual self. The shift in her personality was so pronounced that some staff had considered asking her to leave. At one point, the man sitting next to her intervened, telling the staff he would look after her. The surveillance footage then showed Christie and this man leaving the casino together at 1:13 a.m. Given that her car remained in the parking lot, this raised immediate concerns about what might have happened after they exited the building. Search and rescue teams were organized promptly, searching by car, on foot, and by helicopter. People came from all over to help find Christie and bring her home. Christie's mother, Debbie, was determined to find her daughter, stating, "I want my daughter back, and I want her back now. I may be 5'1" and blonde, but they just met a barracuda, and the fight's on." The investigators soon identified the man from the footage. Just minutes before Christie arrived at the casino, he had used his player's card at one of the slot machines. The card was registered to a 53-year-old man named Mario Garcia. Mario Garcia was a married father of 2 teenage sons and worked as a project manager at a local hospital. His wife, Jean, described him as a family man and a great father, as did one of his sons, Chris. When police visited Mario's 5-acre property in Auburn, California, to question him, they noticed scratches on his face and chest. These injuries were curious because none of the casino patrons or staff recalled seeing them on Mario during the evening he spent with Christie. An emergency room doctor who had been seated near Mario at the blackjack table later stated, "I didn't see any injuries." No, and I'm reasonably good at making those kind of observations because that's what I do for a living. It was also revealed that the day after Christie disappeared, Mario had visited an eye doctor, and his co-workers had noticed his injuries as well. Mario claimed the scratches came from poison oak and falling from a tree while doing yard work after returning home from the casino. He told investigators, "I might have fallen off a little tractor in the tree and just poison on my face." This explanation raised suspicions, as it would have meant he was doing yard work in the middle of the night before going to work early the next morning. The investigators noted that the scratches appeared to follow a distinct pattern resembling fingernail marks across his face and chest rather than the random scratches one would expect from a yard accident. Mario was subsequently detained on a weapons charge while the investigation continued. He denied any involvement in Christie's disappearance, stating that they had simply played blackjack together, said goodbye at his car, and gone their separate ways. The surveillance footage showed his car leaving the parking lot 4 minutes after they walked out together, and it appeared that he was alone in the vehicle. Mario suggested that perhaps Christie's boyfriend had something to do with her disappearance. However, despite the troubled relationship between Christie and Danny, investigators found no evidence linking Danny to her disappearance, and he seemed genuinely concerned about her welfare. As the investigation proceeded, detectives uncovered troubling information about Mario's past. In 1978, near Oakland, California, a then 27-year-old Mario had met his neighbor, 26-year-old Wendy Ward. The two began dating, but when Wendy attempted to end their relationship, Mario reacted with extreme violence. On January 12, 1979, Mario had forced Wendy into his van. She later recounted, "He was holding my neck, or he was holding my head, and he says, 'You do anything. You do anything. I will take your head, and I will smash it.' Wendy tried to resist. I said no. I was just clawing, scratching whatever I could do. Then he started to choke me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't breathe." She added that she thought she was going to die. After driving her to his apartment, Mario assaulted her. He pulled a gun out of his cabinet, and he held it to my head, and he pulled the trigger. He says, "Well, it wasn't loaded this time, but basically I can come and get you anytime I want." Huh? He then assaulted her again, before calmly making himself a sandwich and driving her home. Wendy later reflected, "I'm surprised that I actually am alive. I'm very lucky." Wendy went directly to the hospital, and Mario was arrested. The Alameda County District Attorney's Office recommended charges, including 2 counts of forcible rape, 1 count of kidnapping, 1 count of burglary, and 1 count of assault with a deadly weapon. However, the case stalled for 2 years before Mario was offered a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to 1 count of assault with a deadly weapon and received 18 months of probation. After his relationship with Wendy ended, Mario began seeing another woman named Lynette Smith. Lynette was described by her brother Tom as outgoing and fun to be around, much like Wendy. This relationship was also described as volatile. Mario was angry with Lynette after she chose to terminate a pregnancy after conceiving with him, but they decided to celebrate the holiday season together, along with Lynette's mother, Violet. On Christmas night in 1979, after having dinner together, Mario, Lynette, and Violet were in a car that plunged into the Oakland estuary near the Oakland Airport. Both Lynette and Violet perished in the accident while Mario survived. He claimed he had panicked, removed his seatbelt, opened a window, and escaped as water rushed into the vehicle. Everybody else, I presumed, got out. He later said Mario told officers that Lynette had been driving, though this could not be confirmed. He hired a criminal lawyer who advised him to say nothing to the police. No charges were filed regarding the deaths of Lynette and her mother. Following Christie's disappearance, Detective Murchison spoke with Wendy about her relationship with Mario. Wendy mentioned feeling sick to her stomach when she heard about Christie. After the deaths of Lynette and Violet, Lynette's brother, Tom, had reached out to Wendy, an old friend. When Wendy learned that Lynette had been in a relationship with Mario Garcia and had died in a car accident with her mother, she was stunned. She told Tom about her own experiences with Mario. For the detectives investigating Christie's disappearance, this pattern of behavior was deeply disturbing. Returning to the investigation of Christie's disappearance, detectives examined Mario's Toyota thoroughly. The vehicle had been cleaned and the mats in the trunk had been removed. However, forensic technicians found hairs on a door handle and in the trunk that were consistent with Christie's DNA. The hairs were compared against DNA from Christie's hairbrush, and they matched. The statistical probability of these hairs belonging to someone else was 1 in 720 quintillion. Additionally, a small stain on the back seat tested positive for blood in preliminary testing, though the stain-repellent material prevented further DNA analysis. These findings significantly strengthened the case against Mario. The surveillance footage from the parking lot provided limited information due to the camera's periodic scanning pattern, which caused different sections to come in and out of view. When Mario's Toyota was unlocked, the lights flashed 4 times. 3 minutes and 41 seconds later, the headlights came on and the vehicle began to pull out of the parking space. Mario told police that Christie had realized she left her phone in the casino and had gone back inside to retrieve it. But this claim was not supported by the surveillance cameras. She hadn't returned to the casino, meaning the last confirmed sighting of her was as she walked away with Mario. Investigators believed she might have been incapacitated in the rear seats of the vehicle, making her invisible to the security cameras. Investigators also noted that Mario's car was seen driving in the opposite direction from his home, contrary to his statement that he had driven straight home. His phone records further contradicted his timeline. He claimed to have gone to bed and then left for work around 8:30 a.m., but his phone records showed he had called his wife at 7:51 a.m., and this call connected through a tower north of his property. Mario's wife refused to cooperate or speak with the police during the investigation. Mario's coworkers also mentioned that he had arrived at work closer to 10:30 a.m., not 9:30 a.m. as he had claimed. He had told investigators he needed to be at work for a 9:30 a.m. appointment, but his colleagues confirmed he was late, arriving nearer to 10:30 a.m. 3 weeks after Christie was last seen with no sign of her. Despite extensive searches, Mario Garcia was charged with murder, even though her body had not been found. This would be the first attempt at such a prosecution in the county. People who knew. Christie speculated whether Mario might have put something in her drink that night at the casino. During the investigation, it was discovered that a week after Christie's disappearance, Mario had conducted online searches about testing for date rape drugs. He had also visited websites looking at forensic firearms evidence and forensic toxicology, suggesting he was researching how investigators might build a case. In a 2006 interview with the television program 40 Hours, Mario continued to deny any involvement in Christie's disappearance. When asked about that evening, he stated, "We were at that table for a period of time until that table got hot. She asked me, 'Hey, do you want to go to another table?' home? And I said, sure. When correspondent Aaron Moriarty asked him what happened to her Mario, how could she simply disappear after she was with you? He replied, I don't have answers for that. Regarding his previous incident with Wendy, Mario claimed she had made allegations that weren't true. He said there was no gun involved and referred to their relationship as a stormy one, denying that he was physically abusive. The trial began in September 2006. Mario's defense attorney argued there was insufficient evidence for a murder conviction and suggested that Christy might still be alive somewhere. However, the prosecution presented compelling evidence. Mario had been the last person seen with Christy. He had unexplained scratches that weren't present earlier in the evening. His movements and timeline were inconsistent with his statements. He was late for work the next day. He had made several concerning internet searches, and most significantly, Christy's hair and blood were found in his car. While the jury did not hear about Mario's previous violent incidents due to legal restrictions, Wendy Ward attended the trial to support Christy's family, showing remarkable solidarity. She later expressed that she felt she needed to be there for them, understanding the pain and uncertainty they were experiencing. As 2006 came to a close, the jury delivered their verdict. Mario Garcia was found guilty of murder. At his sentencing in January 2007, Mario maintained his innocence, stating, I suppose that at this hearing, I'm supposed to ask for mercy for forgiveness and to show remorse. However, I will not do such a thing. I did not kill Christy Wilson. I am innocent. Mario received a sentence of 25 years to life, but this was later increased due to his previous attack on Wendy Ward. The minimum term was doubled to 59 years to life. His sentence officially began on January 11th, 2007. Following his conviction, his wife Jean filed for divorce. The sentencing hearing provided Christy's family an opportunity to address her killer. Stacy Christie's sister expressed that Christy was her other half, saying, she was a part of me. I've lost a part of my past, present, and future. Christy's stepfather described Mario as a sick human being and an animal, adding, I don't believe he will ever tell us where our daughter is. I have no doubt he'd kill again. Christy's father, Dennis, overcome with emotion, told the court, I'll miss not walking her down the aisle playing with my grandchildren that has been taken away from me because of your disregard for human life. Also, present in the courtroom were the loved ones of Lynette and Violet, who had died in the Oakland estuary accident. Lynette's sister and Violet's daughter Marilyn prepared a statement that was not read aloud, but was considered by the judge. In it, she wrote, Mario, only you and God know for sure what happened on the night of December 25th, 1979. I don't know if there is a life hereafter, but I do know that if there is, my mom and Lynette met Christy as she arrived, and the three of them helped me write this statement. She expressed hope that Mario would never be released from prison. Detective Murchison reflected on the case, saying, I think the system failed Wendy. It failed a lot of people. It failed Lynette Smith and Violet Davis. Unfortunately, these investigations were handled differently back then. Finally, justice had been served, but the outcome was bittersweet. Although Mario had been convicted, Christy's remains had not been found. After the trial, Debbie spoke to reporters saying justice had been served and adding, now if he's any kind of man, he'll tell us where he disposed of my daughter The uncertainty about Christie's whereabouts continued to cause immense anguish for her family. Detectives Don Murchison and Nuno Tavares remained dedicated to finding Christie. For them, Mario's conviction was not the end of the case. They conducted searches in septic tanks, abandoned mine shafts, and numerous other locations. Detective Murchison later recalled, "We actually pumped an entire septic tank out. We pumped out the entire 2,000 gallons of sewage and went through it by hand." Despite these extensive efforts, Christie's remains were not found. The detectives were determined to bring closure to her family, stating, "We wanted to find her to show Mario, you are not going to win. You're not winning this. We're going to find her and bring her home to the family." During this time, Mario continued to file appeals against his conviction, which was particularly difficult for Christie's family, Debbie commented. "You can't move forward completely when you have all these appeals. You know, it's like you move forward 5 steps, and then you're back in it again." In 2017, Debbie decided to contact Mario directly. He responded via letter, and while he didn't confess to killing Christie, he did apologize to Debbie. He implied that if he could be released early from prison, he might provide information about Christie's whereabouts, writing, "I would give you anything if I could go home to die, surrounded by my family." Ultimately, Debbie ceased this correspondence, realizing, "I was sitting there thinking, what on earth are you doing? Debbie, get a grip. It would be such a disgrace. He will not use my daughter's body as a bargaining chip." Detectives Murchison and Tavares continued their efforts to find Christie. They decided to contact Mario's sons, Chris and Andy, asking if they could recall anything that might help locate Christie. The sons provided detailed information about their father's behavior in the days following Christie's disappearance. Chris mentioned that on the Saturday after Christie vanished, he had a soccer game. He observed his father working on a tractor around their property with what he described as a crazed look in his eyes, working frantically. Mario had firmly told his son he wouldn't be attending the game, which was unusual for him. Based on this information, the detectives decided to conduct another search of the property, which had been searched before. The Garcia family had left the property in 2007, and the officers asked Chris to indicate exactly where he had seen his father that day, right next to the detached garage along the road. August 2020. Using ground-penetrating radar equipment, investigators examined a 5-acre radius around the former Garcia residence. After 2 unsuccessful attempts on the 3rd try, approximately 100 yards from the home, they found a bone that was determined to belong to Christie Wilson. As they removed more soil, Christie's complete skeleton was discovered and identified through dental records. No clothing or jewelry was found with the remains. At a press conference, Placer County officials announced, "The family of Christie Wilson say they've been tormented by her whereabouts since she went missing some 15 years ago. Now, law enforcement officials are able to provide some closure for the family through their discovery after returning to the place at the center of this mystery all that time ago." Detective Tavares explained why the remains hadn't been located during the initial searches. The burial wasn't concentrated in a small area. There had been landscaping done across the property, and Mario had at least 4 days to conceal evidence. It wasn't until we used that ground-penetrating radar that we were able to get a more narrow-defined area to search where we located her, officials explained. Cadaver dogs had been used in the first search, but hadn't detected anything. Detective Tavares noted, "Cadaver dogs are a tool like any other tool that we use. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. While Christie's cause of death could not be determined, her remains showed evidence of a broken hand and a broken nose. Following the discovery of Christie's remains, her family addressed the media. Debbie expressed profound relief, stating, "Today is an absolute joyous day. It's a day that for 14 and a half years, I and my family have traveled a journey, and to this day that we have so longed for. It's a day of peace, a peace that we haven't had, and we are so happy to finally be able to close this chapter of torment." Placer County Sheriff Devin Bell emphasized that the search for Christie had never ceased since 2005, describing the discovery as about detectives and investigators being tenacious and committed to piecing together a puzzle. He also noted that the convicted murderer had refused to cooperate and would not supply any information that would lead to closing this for the family or extend any sense of compassion towards them. The Placer County District Attorney reflected on the case. That jury had a difficult task. They got it right, and they knew it, and we all knew it. This is an example of the greatest level of perseverance of a police department. I mean seriously, these men worked tirelessly on this case. They persevered. Debbie later described the moment she learned her daughter's remains had been found. Placer County detectives traveled to her home in Scottsdale, Arizona, to deliver the news in person. She recalled, "I'm standing in front of my door in Scottsdale, Arizona. I was kind of just in a fog, like, what are you doing here?" I went, "Oh my gosh, did you find her?" And they shook their head. Yes. And with that, I think I went into shock a bit, and I kept asking them, "Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure?" And they said, "Yes, we are. We're absolutely sure." The discovery of Christie's remains brought a measure of peace to her family. Debbie reflected, "I feel we do now have a sense, although bittersweet, there is a sense of peace. We can let go of the torment of not knowing where she is, coming up with a million different scenarios in our own head. That is gone. I can let that go now. We can bring her home and give her a proper and respectful burial that she so deserves." On Christmas Eve, 2020, Mario Garcia died in prison from complications related to COVID-19. He was 68 years old. This occurred just a few months after Christie's remains were finally found. The story of Christie Wilson reflects the unwavering dedication of her family, and the investigators who refused to give up Detective Murchison summarized their commitment. "We never gave up on trying to find Christie. We looked for her for 15 years. Her family certainly never gave up. They trusted us with the most precious thing they had in their lives, which was their daughter. We were going to bring her home." Christie Wilson was a deeply loved and cherished person with much potential. As her mother beautifully expressed, "I was so blessed to be her mom for 27 years, and that I will carry with me forever." The night grows quiet as this chapter of a long journey finally finds its peaceful conclusion.